Hi everybody, welcome back. I just wanted to congratulate you first on finishing week one and also give you a quick recap of this week's lesson. So what were some of the things that you should be picking out from the readings, and also go over a few reminders and how you can prepare for future discussion board posts. So let's go ahead and get started. Um, I wanted to discuss something that was not specifically mentioned in the readings, but something that I wanted you to start thinking about. So something called pedagogy and the student-teacher role. So pedagogy, just basically, the very basic definition means the method and practice of teaching. So you'll hear that word a lot if you're entering the education field. So from the Jacobs and Alcock 2017 reading, some of the things that they discuss are the teacher-student relationship as being the foundation to the classroom experience. So what roles do teachers and students play in the classroom narrative? So there's two kind of roles that they kind of discussed or introduced briefly. The teacher role can either be to disseminate knowledge, and the student's role is to receive knowledge. So that's kind of our traditional view on education and what it has been since basically the beginning of the American education system in the United States. The second one that we can look at is the teacher role as more as encouraging innovation, and the student role then is to take risks and create. So create artifacts and create products of their learning. So we'll go a little bit more into that in depth another time, but just kind of start thinking about what does that mean. So one of the things I was pointing out from the reading, and that's kind of close to my heart as an educator, is that historically nurturing has always been at the heart of education. And for me, compassion in education is very important, and we'll go into that later on in the semester. But again, something that I want you to kind of to start thinking about, what has been the foundation of education, and it should be nurturing and compassion. Okay, real quick, we're not going to go into this too much, but they briefly talked about a Danish case study. Scandinavians' education systems are very well known for being they're widely researched and innovative, and so a lot of research has been done on how and why are they so effective. So they bring up the Danish education system, and one of the things that they found was that they have a clearly outlined pedagogy that produces clear results. So again, we're talking about pedagogy. And another topic that they introduced that is becoming more and more important in education, in modern education, is the idea of interprofessionalism, or collaboration with the community, so with parents and other community resources and other educators, so we can create a holistic classroom experience. So basically, we're not relying only on teacher knowledge in order to create our classroom experiences. So moving on, a question that I want you to consider from the reading, Jacobs and Alcock point out that a classroom has, with 4 walls and a blackboard and the instructor situated at the front, relays a certain message about the student-teacher relationship. So think back about those 2 different relationships they talked about, as the teacher being the giver of information and the student is the receiver, or as a teacher acting as an innovator and the student acting as a creator. So I want you to spend a few minutes, so you can go ahead and pause the video, write down, how do you interpret the traditional classroom setup? What kind of message does this setup send to you? And if you've experienced any different types of educational settings that doesn't have this traditional experience of the teacher in the front of the classroom, then maybe write those down. For example, right now you're taking an online class. So how is learning different in an online class, or how do you expect it to be different compared to a traditional classroom? So take a few minutes to do that, and once you're done, go ahead and move on to the next part of the video. So Jacobs and Alcock also discuss 3 pedagogies. So we're going to kind of break those down for a second. So the first one is called an antiquated pedagogy. So these are pedagogies that do not engage the learner. So a lot of times this can be considered as the sage on the stage idea, wherein, like we talked about before, the role of the teacher or the instructor is just to relay knowledge to the student. So the instructor's role in this case is acting as the ultimate holder of knowledge. And there's little intent to engage the student in learning, right? So the teacher gives you the knowledge and the student just has to take it in. When we see this type of pedagogy enacted, the role of the student becomes very passive and unengaged. And I'm sure that at least some of you have had these type of learning experiences. So think about, what did that classroom look like? What did that instructor look like? This is not to assume, so we need to be careful. This is not to assume that classrooms, so traditional four-wall classrooms or lecture halls with a blackboard and instructor at the front, are not engaging. So there are engaging pedagogies that we can still incorporate in a traditional classroom setting, and we won't talk about that just yet. But so just be careful, don't make a relationship between those two just yet. If the teacher, however, assumes that students are a blank slate whose minds will be filled by their knowledge, then we have an example of antiquated pedagogy, where we see that students are passive learners, and that's not what we want in modern education. So some tips that Jacobs and Alcock kind of give to us about how we should view learning in a contemporary classroom. Some of the things that we should avoid, again, is thinking about learners as receptacles or as placeholders. Learners are not robots. We can't just feed them information. Learners are not obedient receivers. So in typical classrooms, still nowadays, you expect students not to answer questions or ask questions, and that's not the case. Learners are not followers. They should be making their own path with the information that they receive. And learners should not be considered non-entities. So we want to get to understand who our students are. Again, that compassion component comes in. Okay, the second pedagogy that Jacobs and Alcock discuss are classical pedagogy. So this pedagogy stems from ancient Greece, when the role of the teacher is to nurture. Again, we talk about nurturing. But more so, it's the teacher's role to understand what the individual needs are of each student. So in education, this can be considered the zone of proximal development. So you can click on this link on the lesson and learn more about that. Or scaffolding. So understanding and meeting where the learners are and figuring out what is their best way to grow. How can we help them achieve growth in the classroom based on where they're already at? So in other words, the teacher needs to be aware of where students are in terms of their development, especially in relation to their understanding of a particular subject. So this is why I conducted the Socrative survey. I want to see where you are in terms of your experiences with education, and where are you planning on going after this course? Are you planning on going in the education field, or are you just curious about this class? So this type of pedagogy focuses on understanding the learner, and according to Jacobs and Alcock, instructors must make instructional decisions relating to pacing of presentations, so knowing how to sequence material and determining when to encourage the student to either work independently or in groups, and creating dynamic learning experiences. So classical pedagogies actually support and help students to become more confident and self-directed learnto So some of the suggestions for from Jacobs and Alcock is that we should consider how to create certain learning experiences in contemporary classrooms. So some of the things that we should focus on are fluency, originality, abstractness, resistance to quick closure, colorfulness, and humor. So go back to the readings if you're not familiar with what exactly they're referring to. But learners should be viewed as critical thinkers, collaborative team members, project-based planners, creative thinkers, researchers, and knowledge organizers. So again, go back to the reading if you're not really sure what they're talking about right here. And then they also suggest contemporary pedagogy. So right now we're seeing a huge shift in education and how it looks, especially due to advances in technology and our own advancement in understanding of learning. So research on effective contemporary learning points out that contemporary teaching needs to incorporate the following. So active instruction. So you can still have active instruction in traditional four-walled classrooms. What does that look like? And we'll talk about that a little bit more. So, but teachers should start to avoid lectures and incorporate more active teaching methods. Also, another really important characteristic, especially if you're going into the education field, is assessment on teaching. So you should assess yourself constantly, and you should have assessment methods that are reliable in order to track student progress, in order to determine efficacy of instructional methods. And I don't mean just standardized testing. I mean methods that you can use in order to assess your own teaching. And creating a dialogue of successful teaching methods. So a conversation really needs to start about what education looks like in contemporary classrooms, what are things that work and what are things that don't work. And so your role as a future educator, if that's where you're going, will need to be to continue to create this community of educators so we can discuss what learning and what teaching should look like. Okay, so I've kind of recapped all of, the main reading. I did not discuss the videos for you this week. I felt like those would elicit some emotional responses from you that I didn't need to, give you an overview on. So, but what I do want to do is kind of guide you towards how you should be preparing for the discussion board post. So you guys did a great job in discussion board post number 1. Moving forward, there is not a discussion board for next week because actually you were supposed to complete it next week. So a lot of you are ahead of the game. So great job on that. But make sure you are doing the readings for week 2 and week 3, because week 3's discussion board post will include week 1's readings, week 2 readings, and week 3 readings. So in order to prepare you for that, since you might think that might be a heavy lift for you, I want you to consider some reflection questions. So these shouldn't take too long, but make sure that you answer them, write them down in a journal or a binder on your computer, whatever's convenient for you. But pause this video or come back to this. Take a few minutes to write a reflection on this week's text. So that includes the videos. We're going to discuss the videos as text as well. So things that I want you to consider are, how do this week's text affirm, confirm, or both, affirm or deny your ideas on the role of the teacher and student in modern education. So what you read, do you agree with it? Why or why not? What are your thoughts about the text? Is this so radical that you don't think education should look like this based on your experiences? Or do you think we're moving in the right direction based on your experiences? So maybe write down some of those thoughts. And again, how can you relate to the text according to the educational experiences you've had? So what has education looked like for you up until this point? Was that a problem for you? Did you struggle? Were there classes that you felt like the teacher was more invested in you? Just take a good look, like a holistic look about what your educational experience was up until this point, and start thinking in the direction of, what do you want your classroom to look like if you're going into education? Or where do you think the direction is that we need to move in education in order to be, let's say, more effective? So answer those questions so that way you're well prepared for discussion board post number 3. And a few reminders. I think most of us did a really good job this week, but make sure that you do complete the Socratic survey. The instructions to do so are listed on the syllabus. It's very simple, should take less than 5 minutes. But I do need those responses by the end of the next week, please, so I can take a look at where we all are in terms of education. And don't forget that you should be responding to at least 3 of your peers' responses, and you can respond to me as well. Don't be shy. That will include as 1 response. So make sure you're doing that. But again, you guys have been doing a really good job. And moving forward, for the next couple weeks before we get to discussion board post number 3, I will continue to kind of help you shape your reflections on the readings so you can do a good job on responding to the discussion board posts. But after week 3, I want you to start taking the reins and start thinking about ways that you can construct a reflection on those week's readings so you can complete the discussion board post. Not all posts will be a reflective response. Some of them might be a product that you have to create. So we're going to do some more creative things as well as some reflections. So just think in general, how can you give an overview of the readings and how can you apply that to your own experiences? Again, if you have any questions, please email me and I will post another video at the end of next week. Take care. Hope everybody's staying warm. Have a good weekend. Bye.